Hello, I'm Leanne from the Haberdashery, and in this video I'm going to talk through setting up Affinity Designer for digital pattern cutting. I've actually based this video on a blog post that I wrote about a year ago on the same topic, and I thought that some of you may find the video easier to follow than the blog post. If you do want to use the blog post as a reference though, there's a link to it in the description. There's also a link to this set of tutorials about pattern making in Adobe Illustrator by Pattern Lab London. These tutorials are what originally inspired me to write the blog post on Designer, as I tried to implement what I learned from them into my software. They are fantastic and I highly recommend watching them. So firstly, let's have a look at why you might choose to use Affinity over Adobe. I used Adobe for years, but I swapped over to Affinity a couple of years ago now. So Adobe uses the software as a subscription model, and it progressively became more and more expensive. It was hard for me to justify against what I saw as the lack of bug fixing or upgrades to the software. As it stands, getting Illustrator as a one-off program as an individual will cost you in the region of £240 per year. That's £19.97 every month. If you wanted to get another application, say you wanted to get InDesign as well to design your pattern instruction leaflets, you then have to add on another £19.97 a month, so that then becomes £480 per year. And if you want any more apps than that, then you may as well just get this all apps option, which will cost you in the region of £600 per year if you are an individual. If you are a business, you are going to be paying quite a bit more. Designer, on the other hand, if we click the Buy Now button, is normally £48.99. You can see at the moment they're running a 50% off deal, so you can actually get it for £23.99. And that is a one-off payment that includes all future updates. You pay it once, you don't have to pay it again. Personally, £23.99 once, or even if you get it when it's full price at £48.99 like I did, or paying £240 per year every year, I know which one I'm going to go with. Alongside Designer, you've also got Photo and you've got Publisher. So depending on where you are in your pattern cutting journey, you may find that one or both of these programs are helpful. So Publisher is Affinity's version of InDesign. You'd use it for designing your pattern instruction leaflets. Photo, if you're taking photos of samples of those patterns that you've created, or if you've got some pattern testers who are sending you some raw files or something like that, this is a really powerful photo editing software. So it may be worth considering getting one or both, depending on how you're going to use these alongside Designer if you don't already have them. So there is a couple of differences between Affinity Designer and Adobe Illustrator, which if you watch the Pattern Lab tutorials or if you've previously used Illustrator, you will notice. So if we jump into Designer quickly. So Designer has most of the same tools as Illustrator, though they do often have different names or icons. I have gone through these in the blog post. I will go through these shortly as well. One major difference is that you can't save a separate workspace in Affinity Designer like you can in Illustrator. Designer has what they call personas, and it has 3 of these, and they're up here. It's these 3 here. So your default one is actually the one we want. This is the Designer persona. This is where you use all your vector graphics, and it has all of the tools that we actually need for pattern cutting. So it's actually really good that this is the default one. Pixel is for creating digital artwork. So you can see all the toolbars most of the toolbars have changed because now you have specific tools for making digital art. And Export is a dedicated export workspace for identifying sections of the artwork that you've created and performing what they call slices. So you isolate those areas and you only export those areas. I found that I don't really use Export or Pixel whatsoever, so it's really good that Designer is the default persona because that's what we use the most in pattern cutting. That's what I use the most in every part of what I use Designer for. So let's get started on setting up the Designer persona for pattern cutting. As you may have noticed, I work on a Mac, so for any shortcuts that require using Command, I will say Command. The shortcuts do work for Control for Windows as well, though. So anytime I say Command something, it will be Control something if you're on a Windows machine. So the first thing that's going to be useful to do is set up rulers and measurements. Now you've noticed that I've got an open file here. You can't actually change an awful lot about Affinity without having an open file. So I've just gone to File, New, and I've opened just an A4 sheet, just so I have something open to let me access all of these different options around here. So first of all, we're going to go to View, and we're going to go to Show Rulers. So as you can see at the moment, we are set to pixels, which isn't particularly helpful for us because we need to be accurate with our measurements. However, it's really, really easy to change these rulers. Just go up to this corner, right click, and there you've got a whole load of different choices that you can set your rulers to. So if you prefer to work in inches, by all means set inches. I'm going to use centimetres, that's what I'm used to. And there we are, they changed really quickly. So the next thing that we need to do is actually go into Designer's Preferences. Now, if you're on a Windows machine, I believe it's in the File menu. On a Mac, it's in the Affinity Designer menu down here, Preferences. Now, mine has automatically come up on the Tools section, which is what we want, that's great. If not, hit the little arrow that I've just clicked on, and you've got all of these options. You can have a look about in them. You don't really need to change much about them. But you want the Tools one to get into this section of options. What we actually want down here, we're not really fussed about changing too much up here. This is what we're interested in, your nudge distance and your modifier nudge distance. So nudge is how much the graphic moves when you use the arrow keys to move it around your artboard, your workspace. So at the moment it's set to pixels, again, not very useful to us. You can set it to inches and it will work in like a decimal of that. So when you're trying to change, say, a 32nd of an inch, you put in the decimal of what that will be here and it will work. I've tried it. I could use centimetres if I wanted to, just like I have done with the rulers. However, I think moving something around by a centimetre is probably going to be too much. So I'm going to select millimetres. And you can see it's automatically set to 1 and 10. So your nudge distance, as I've explained, is moving it around with the arrow keys. Your modifier is when you hold down the shift key and move it around with your arrow keys. So that is a much bigger amount that it moves by. It's really useful if you need to move something, say from one side of a page to another. What you also need to do while we're here is select this checkbox here, Synchronize Tools between documents. This means that every document now and in the future will automatically open up. They'll have 1mm nudge distance, 10mm modifier nudge distance. They'll use all your toolbars, your settings that you're setting now, and you won't have to do it every single time. So you can do it once and forget about it. So we're going to check that, hit close, and that's that sorted. So now let's set up this left-hand toolbar here. We're going to go into View, and it might look a bit confusing at first because you have a Customize Toolbar and a Customize Tools. The one we want for the left toolbar, this one, is Customize Tools. Customize Toolbar is actually this top toolbar here. So let's go into Customize Tools. Now, something that I haven't mentioned that you can do in Illustrator that you can't do in Designer is you can't move these tools around between your left toolbar, your top toolbar, and this panel on the side, which is called your Studio. They have set tools within each of them. You can see the default ones, you've got a wide selection of things. What is actually really great about it is it's very easy to customize. You can reset, you can change your number of columns. So however you want to have it, it's really easy to customize. I prefer having it in one column because I can see my tools a lot easier. If you want more, that's fine. It's not a problem. So we can drag out of here tools that we don't want. And let's do that quickly. We do want that. And then tools that we do want, like this one, we're going to swap that for the two separate tools. And this one. It's just drag and drop. It's as simple as that. You can put however many of these you want in there. You can divide them up if you like. Whichever works best for you. So I'm going to quickly go through what these tools are. So this is Move. This is the Artboard Tool. We've got Node. This is Point Transform, Corner, Pen, Vector Brush, Fill. You've got your Rectangle and your Rounded Rectangle. Let's pop them together. You've got your Ellipse tool as well, which I find occasionally I do need that. Artistic Type. There is another one up here called Frame Type, but I haven't worked out how to use that yet or what it's even used for. Artistic Type is it's the type tool that does everything. That's the main one that you need. We've also got your View tool and your Zoom tool, which are handy even if you don't think you're going to use them very often, because you can do various things with them. I'll go deeper into these shortly, but these are the main ones that you will find useful in this toolbar. So hit close, and that's that toolbar set up. So to set this top toolbar, we're going to go back to View. This time we're going to go to Customize Toolbar. And I'm going to drag out, like before, all of the ones that I'm not going to use. I believe. Oh, yep, you can't even move the personas, look. It might be worth keeping those though. So you can see all of these dotted lined areas. These are blocks that you can put tools into. Now, you've obviously got all of these options for the individual tools, but these take up a block each, and the grouped tools, of which there are several as you can see, also only take up a block each. So I would seriously recommend using the block tools. So we've already got our geometry over here. We've got, what else do we need? We've got our arrange. Let's move that over here. So our transform, that is quite useful. Let's pull geometry over here as well. Snap is extremely useful. That's something that Adobe doesn't have that I really like about Affinity, and I'll go into that in a minute. You don't need to keep your document status in the top. I find sometimes it's helpful because you can know at a glance what document you're working on if you've got several open, or you can even see if it's been saved. In this case it hasn't. You can see what zoom it's at, things like that. I just find it useful to keep in the corner. And of course you can just reset it by dragging this default toolbar back in there and dropping it, and it'll put all of these default tools back in there. Now, for this studio, the quickest, fastest way I have found for moving around what's in here is to literally drag it out, click cancel, because there is a lot in here that we don't need. The way to set it up properly is to go to View, Studio, but if I unselect one of these, you'll see that it just closes that menu bar, and I'll have to do that every single time, so it's far faster to do it this way. Now, so you can see that I've got stroke, brushes, layers, and transform left. And what you can do to make it even easier is have them all open like that, which is what I find the easiest, because now you've got the biggest space possible to see all of your layers, to see all the brushes, etc., etc. You also, while you're here, want to make sure that you've got this little box down here ticked, edit all layers. That will come in extremely handy later on. It just means that it makes everything a lot easier for you. Just tick it once and don't have to worry about it then. And that is Designer all set up for cutting patterns. So let's now take a look at what everything does. So if we go down the list on this left-hand toolbar first, so you have your Move tool, does exactly what it says on the tin. Select it, you can move a layer around. What is handy if you want to use the shortcuts is to hover over these tools. They will, if they have a shortcut, it'll tell you in the square brackets, and you don't have to press Command or Control to use these. You just hit the relevant key on your keyboard. So the next one down we've got is the Artboard tool. If you want to edit or create any new print templates anytime, or if you've got a print template open with artboards and you need to alter them, this is the tool you want. You can hit insert if you already know what size your document is and you want to create an artboard based off that. So my document is an A4, so it's automatically created an artboard to A4 size. You can also use this drop down box if you're creating anything for iPads or iPhones, which I find a bit strange. Generally, if you need to change the size of it, you can also then go and change this at any point really to any size that you need. You can use the transform tool to do this. That's probably the easiest and quickest way. So if we wanted to make this square, we could do very quickly 29.7, not 9.7, and there you are. You can also click that little link button there, and that will make sure that if you change one, it changes the other. So let's go 40, there you are. Let's quickly undo those, we don't need that. So unclick that. And yeah, so that's the Artboard tool. The Node tool. The Node tool is quite an interesting tool, mainly because it pops up with this contextual toolbar. So it is the direct equivalent of the direct selection tool, I believe it's called, in Illustrator. It lets you pick a point in an object and alter that point. So you can convert it to a square edge or a rounded corner. You can transform it. You can change the snapping point. Or the one that's going to be most useful actually is to change these actions. So in Illustrator and in the Pattern Lab tutorials, quite often you will want to use the scissors tool or the join tool. Now that's what these two here are. This is break curve, and this is join curve or close curve. So all lines in Designer are referred to as curves. So they're the most important two that you want. They are also found in the toolbar for the pen tool. So if I click on that quickly, actually, you can see it's over here. It's always under the action, and it will always be in either pen or node, which are the two that you're going to be using when you want to use either scissor or join. So you know that they're always there, easy for you to access. So as you've seen just quickly then as well, this toolbar changes depending on which tool you have selected in the main toolbar on the left. So the pen tool actually has slightly different tools to it. The Polygon one has separate tools again, etc, etc. So carry on going back down the toolbar, we've got the point transform tool. So if you use the node tool to select a point, or it actually has a little node tool built in if you can see the cursor, select a point. This allows you to effectively anchor that point and rotate around it. So it will be really useful for when you are getting your print templates all set up and you want to make the most efficient use of space with all your different pattern pieces. You can rotate one around, say, your shoulder corner or something, so you can flip it around and things without actually modifying the block or sloper that you've made. It doesn't affect that, it literally just changes the rotation, which is quite helpful. This here is the corner tool. So if you've drawn quite an angular with pen tool, say something like this. Go onto the corner tool, you can select that corner and change those features. Let's say that one, change the radius, let's put it to 2 centimeters. Ooh, no, it's 2 mil. Hit bake appearance, and if I zoom in, you can zoom in by pressing Command or Control and plus, by the way. You can see now we have a nice corner. So undo that with Command Z. And there we go. If you do zoom in at any point, you may have noticed on Designer's webpage that you can zoom in up to 1,000,000 times, which is quite a lot. Rather than hitting Command and minus every time to come back out, Command 0 brings you back out to the main size of the document that you have in the viewer. So that's the corner tool. Pen tool we've already sort of talked about. Draw whatever you want in there. If you press and hold, it doesn't want to do it now. If we click up here, we can click and hold, and we get these tangent lines, so we can create curves. You join it back up. You can also change curves there. Up here you've got how thick or thin your stroke is, so let's put that to say 3 points so we can see that. There you go. You can change colours, change fill, all of that sort of thing. Let's get rid of those. This tool here is your vector brush tool. You might not use it very often. Vector brushes are how we're going to add our seam allowance, so you may find that you do use it occasionally to modify something about your seam allowance brushes. You shouldn't need to though, they are set to the right sizes. This is all your different options for your vector brush, particularly if you're going to be using a pen and tablet with it. You can also access all your different brushes by going into the brushes panel. You've got your fill tool, which does pretty much what it says on the tin. Click on a shape and it'll fill it. Does occasionally come in handy, which is why I've got it in the toolbar. You won't find that you use it very often, probably, but it is always good to have. And we've got a few polygons here, so we've got a rectangle, a rounded rectangle, and an ellipse. I did start off with just the rectangle. Then I found occasionally I needed rounded ones, then occasionally I needed ellipses, so it worked out the most efficient to just have all three in the toolbar. There is also the option for a Polygon Tool, which has all sorts of other polygons in there, like triangles and hexagons, but these are the main ones that I use, so these are the ones that I've put in my toolbar. Artistic type, again, that, as I mentioned previously, that's your main option for your text. So you've got all of your different fonts that are installed on your computer. So I've got several special fonts that I've installed. These aren't all standard fonts. They all come up. You can choose your recent ones, the ones that you've used in your document. You can even save favorites. And you've got all your options up here for changing your font style. View tool is kind of useful. It allows you to literally grab the document and move it around. When you're using documents like the cutting table that I'll have a look at shortly, because that is so big, it is a lot easier to just grab it and move it than to move it around with your mouse or your touchpad. If you swipe by accident, then you can be off of the workspace very quickly, so this stops you from zooming off like that. And there's also the zoom bar. You can change what you want up here. Might come in handy, might not, whichever's easiest for you. Okay, so that's everything on the left-hand toolbar. Now I did notice that my rulers had changed, so I've just quickly changed them back from pixels to centimeters. I'm not sure why they changed. Let's have a quick look now at what's on this top toolbar here. So this up here is a range, so when you've got multiple layers you can push them back, pull them forwards, move to front, move to back. That can be quite useful if you're trying to select something and it keeps picking something that's either above it or below it. You might not use it all that often, depending on how you work in Designer. It's entirely up to yourself. I just keep it up there because it's handy. Transform is quite useful. So you've got flip horizontal, flip vertical, rotate anti-clockwise and rotate clockwise. That can be handy if, say, you've drawn a pattern piece for half of the front of your bodice and you want to duplicate it exactly on the other side. So you would right click on the layer in this layers panel. If there's a layer here, you'd right click it, you'd select duplicate. So let's just quickly draw something so we can show this. Right click, select duplicate, and then you could rotate it, you could flip it. Not that that's going to be obvious on this. So you've got all of those tools easily there. You can see now if I send that to back, that's how that works. Here you've also got your geometry tools, which in Illustrator are called your Pathfinder tools. So they'll tell you what they are as you hover over them. So you have add, which is reasonably obvious, it adds the two together. Subtract, which takes one away from the other. Intersect, XOR, and divide. So intersect, XOR, and divide, you can see what each of them does. So intersect will only show the little area, say in that pie chart there. XOR will have everything but that area, and divide has everything in 3 separate options. One of the tools that I find extremely useful is snap. So if we open this up, you can enable snapping, you can change the tolerances, you can select all sorts of presets that they have here and create your own if you want. Change the different layers. So if you only want to snap to the layers that you have in a certain group, you can do. Snap to objects that you only have visible. So if we turn one of these off, it will still snap to it, as you can see. But if we turn that option off, it's not really doing it anymore now. So turn that back on. Snap to grid, snap to spread, margins, all of these kind of things that you can turn on and off as you need to. Sometimes you'll find that you will need to turn snap off, in which case you disable it there. Sometimes you'll only need to turn 1 or maybe 2 of these options off to get it to do what you need to do, but it's very handy to have that just there, rather than trying to dig through menus looking for options if there are any. What you can also do here, select these 2 layers and you can add them to a group. You can rename things. And you can turn them off individually, or you can turn the whole group off. And you've got all of these options as well, most of which I don't use. Delete is fairly easy because you just hit delete. You've got, if you ever can't remember your cut, copy and paste shortcuts, you've got them there. There is also a shortcut, as you can see, for grouping and ungrouping. These are the main 2 that I use, and duplicate of course as well. So let's just get rid of them. So other than the quick run through of this studio panel, we'll just have a better look at it. So you've seen how the layers work. If I bring back those layers, you can reorder things very easily. You can change your opacities, you can change how they interact with each other. So that's how the layers panel works. You've also got all of these options down here for creating masks or effects. There's a new layer option. There's a bin button there as well. Stroke. This is to do, if we pick one of these, this is to do with the stroke options on here. So we can change the line sizes, you can change how they work. So if I zoom in a bit, change how these appear, change how lines join with each other, how they align, the order. If you do want something to change with the scale of the item that you're changing it with, select scale with object. We've got your brushes panel, which at the moment is just set to inks. We've got all sorts up here. And you've got your transform, which we can change the size very easily of something, as I've shown you previously. You can link it in all sorts. This is actually quite useful in the transform side as well, because when we're changing sizes or positions of things, we can tell it where to alter the size from. So this is obviously your center. It's just changed it from the left-hand corner. If we undo that and set it to the center and change it to 5 centimeters, there it goes all the way out from the center. So that might be handy on occasion. I do find that this is useful as well for double checking sizes and positions of things. So let's go back to our brushes panel, and I'm going to show you how to install your seam allowance brushes that I keep talking about. So making your own brushes in Affinity Designer is not the easiest thing. And when I realised this, I created a set of seam allowance brushes that you can download from the blog post. So head to the link in the description for the blog post, go to the bottom and you'll find that you can download a set of seam allowance brushes, a cutting table and some print templates. So to install your brushes, you want this little icon here, which is the 4 lines with an arrow next to it. Click on that and hit import brushes. So I've actually put them on my desktop. So on seamallowance.if brushes, that's the file. Click on that and press open. Brushes imported successfully. Great. And these are your brushes. So you can see, because I've got this selected, it started adding them to the outside. So to work out which ones you've got, you simply hover over them. So I've got both centimetre and inch ones in here. And these are accurate, so you shouldn't need to change anything about the size on these. Now what you can see, if I zoom in a bit more, actually going back to how I was, is that where the draw line was for the outside of the shape, if I go back, where this shape line is, you now have a dotted line. And you also now have a solid line out here. So this actually gives us a seam line, which is the dotted line, and a solid line for your cut line at the right distance away. This is actually where Affinity is a lot easier than Illustrator for handling seam allowance brushes. So in your stroke panel, you will want to set this up to do it for it to show up properly, because sometimes with some shapes it can change how it looks and it can be a bit strange. So you want to hit this one here on your style. This is your vector brush option. You want your mitre join, so you get nice square corners on something like this square. You can have it on this option here if you really want, if you want to cut off those corners. And you want it to align the stroke to your outside position. And the reason that you want to align it to your outside position is so that the dotted line centres exactly where your shape line is, and then your cut line comes outside of that. And because we've got it set to aligning to outside, when we select our brush, we don't have to worry about there being an inside line like Illustrator does, and you'll see that on the Pattern Lab tutorials, that they have to go through and select it and change it so that you get rid of those inside lines. You don't have anything to worry about with this. It will do it for you. If you want to change, if your shape's not coming up quite how you expected and you want to change how that looks, you can have a go at changing all of these options and seeing what works best. So you can see that you've got align straight to center, align to inside, align to outside. You always want align to outside for it to be accurate. But you can see how altering those joins changes things. So let's take a quick look at the cutting table and the print templates too while we are here. Going to my Finder, there's my cutting table, let's open that up. And so it looks like a great white box when you first open it, but if I show you here, so your dimensions are 500 centimeters, so 5 meters by 5 meters. So you have a very big area for designing your patterns on. And in this corner here, you have a little key. You can copy all of these options onto your patterns, so you can see really easily where notches are supposed to go, where your grain line is, things like that, and that will copy across very easily. We'll just group these quickly here. So then anything that you draw will come up as a layer here, and you can just copy and duplicate things across. Very straightforward. The print templates, if we have a look at them quickly. So you have one set up for each of the different A sizes that are going to be useful. AO is your normal copy shop size. A4 is obviously your print at home size. There are going to be some occasions where you might find having A1, 2 and 3 useful, but A4 and AO are going to be your main ones. I'll have a look at the AO option. So again, as you open it up, it looks quite blank. That's because we're so zoomed out, because we have 12 artboards. So each artboard here represents a page. And you'll notice here in the layers panel that we have artboard 1 at the bottom, even though it's the top. So don't be tempted to reorder these at all. This is down to the way that Designer exports and the order that it exports in. So it will always export this bottom option first, then the next, then the next. So if you have a design that takes multiple pages, and you definitely want it exporting in the right order, otherwise it'll be a bit of a headache to try and reorder them afterwards. And again, if we zoom in, you can see we have shapes in the corner, we have a centimetre rule, and over here in the right hand corner we have an inch rule. These will help you for when things are being printed out, just so that they can be sized correctly. It's a really easy way to check. Every artboard is also identified with its page number. Oops. It's very easy to get lost when you're zoomed in this level, and you'll see that as we go down into the corner, the shape forms a diamond, which will help with identifying where your pages are supposed to get structured together. Now there's one thing to be aware of when working across multiple artboards like this. So if I just copy this rectangle, this square across. So artboard 12 was selected, so it's automatically been put into artboard 12. If we drag it up, it's now on top of all the artboards, so let's resize it so we can actually see it. So now it may be above artboard 12, but it's not directly in it. If then you can see it's now in artboard 11 because it went over artboard 11, and now you can't see it in artboard 7, but it's moved. This can cause a few headaches if you don't know what you're looking at, so it's moving around all over the place here. The reason for this is that the way Designer works, particularly with artboards, is that wherever you're working over, that item then becomes a child of the artboard that you're working over. There isn't an option at the moment to deselect this and allow it to work over any artboard. So it is worth bearing in mind, particularly if you have groups of big objects, that, you know, if they start disappearing like this, you haven't lost half of your pattern or anything like that. It's just hidden under the artboard. So you will then need to grab it and drag it all the way to the top for it to appear over both. It's a bit annoying, but unfortunately that is how artboards are set up at the moment. There isn't really an easy way around that. So hopefully that should set you up to get working away in Affinity Designer. I hope this video has been helpful, and if you want to download the seam allowance brushes, the cutting table and the print template files, you can find them at the bottom of my blog post, which again is linked in the description. Do let me know if you have any questions about Designer in the comments. I will try my best to answer them for you. If you like this video, please hit the like button and please consider subscribing as well. If you do want to support me and my work, check out the Haberdashery shop and all of the items that I have for sale there. Thank you for watching, and I really hope you enjoy designing and cutting your patterns in Affinity Designer.